Hello guys, and finally big businesses inside Russia started talking about the approaching collapse. First of these businesses and then of the Russian economy. They were afraid to speak the truth during these years of the failed blitzkrieg that led to the empty federal budget, but now even the Moscow Times released that statistics that demonstrate the problems the big Russian business encounters in 2025 is way worse than it was in 1998. And here I need to remind you, this is the year when the Kremlin had to announce default. They also compare the fall in demand to 2009, that was the result of the global financial crisis, and 2015, the first real sanctions and the beginning of Russia's isolation after the annexation of Crimea. Oligarchs around Putin are very dissatisfied with his constant failures and might be among the first to pressure for the negotiations or maybe sometime soon even the change of the Kremlin dictator. So let's discuss these statistics and what it tells us about Russia at this moment during the big war. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see Putin in The Hague where he belongs, please subscribe, share these videos to spread the truth. And let's begin with this really promising statistics which says that a lot of big Russian businesses report they are on the brink of the collapse. They were afraid to share the truth, they did not know how to survive in such context when you can literally be imprisoned or jump out of the window. But at a certain moment of time, when the collapse of their lifelong enterprises became real, they released the data. And according to it, the situation is worse than it was in 1998. That was during very, very crazy 90s. Like every Russian is afraid of that period that was full of poverty and mafia gangs that literally stole everything that previously belonged to the USSR. And then after its collapse, people like Putin and gang around him managed to incorporate a lot of that wealth. But the situation was so bad in 1998 that they had to announce collapse, default, people lost lots of their money. Another reason why millions of Russians withdraw trillions of rubles from their bank accounts. But right now, what are the main reasons for these problems? First of all, sanctions. They do work, and that is why it is so important to remain united and not to be treated like basic principles of the international order. So sanctions and this global isolation of Russia. Then, of course, high interest rates that even when the Central Bank of Russia tries to play with them, lowers them a bit, then returns them back, it does not change the situation in general. They are too high. There are a lot of companies that cannot return their debts. By the way, usually this is small size businesses, but more and more Russian banks fear the crisis because of these bad debts, as they describe them, the ones that the Russians do not plan to return. And of course, this also influences the big business, because here we come to another point of this Russia collapse plan, sums up for that, and subscribe to witness together. That is slow economy. Slow economy and literally no consumer spending is the result of this exhausting war, the fact that all of the federal budget, all of the priorities were given to the military industry, which, thank God, we are very successfully destroying deep inside the Russian rear. But in general, other spheres of the Russian industry are suffering greatly. These are construction, car production, roads, railroads. We may speak about a lot of such branches of the Russian industry that were literally destroyed by Putin's mismanagement and, of course, the failed blitzkrieg. They also compare in Moscow Times the demand of consumers, and that it lowered very seriously. And we don't mean a couple of percent, we mean the situation that is worse than it was in 2009, when the world was under the negative influence of the global financial crisis, and also 2015, when Russia first received the consequences of the annexation of Crimea in the form of sanctions and international isolation. But with all that, an extremely important factor that remains under, investigated, under reported by the global media is the negative growth of the Russian GDP. Literally, they had to lower the expectation a number of times during this year alone. But now, these big businessmen, top managers of various Russian companies, and now I'm not even speaking about Lukoil, Gazprom, Rosneft, Tatneft, which were literally destroyed by the Ukrainian drone sanctions, the economic sanctions. I'm talking about different kinds of businesses that were previously successful. Just as food production, cafes and restaurants that we've discussed yesterday, with more than 5% closed in Moscow, where people are rich in comparison to the other parts of the Russian Federation. So all of that contributed to the Russian GDP that is like less than 0.6, 0.5. That's literally nothing. And perhaps right now Russia is among the champions of this lowest and worst GDP growth. Once again, thumbs up for that. And we may discuss it in detail tomorrow if you join me for a live conversation, 9 p.m. Kyiv. Please share these videos, because the world pushes Ukraine to surrender. The world wants to appease Putin, forgetting to check the real situation inside Russia. And it is total loss of control. I'm not talking about dozens of Russian regions that are a war zone, or constantly cancelled flights because the Russian airspace is full of Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian missiles, a tremendous change. I'm not talking about destroyed oil refineries. Now I'm talking about businesses that one by one shut in Russia. By the way, top companies like we've discussed, construction, nobody trusts Russia has a normal future. Buying cars, why would you buy a car if there is no gasoline in a country that was once a gas station? And many more. And even food became super expensive. And once again, Putin pretends that everything is okay, and many negotiators, or those who want to push Ukraine to surrender, base their assumptions on what Putin says, but not on the real numbers. Read the Russian Telegram channels, listen to their vloggers talking, and you'd be surprised how negative they are, how disappointed they are, and how confidently they predict the collapse of the Russian Federation. Subscribe to witness that together. Follow me on Anna Danilchuk for longer weekly conversations, and also on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord. All the links in the description of this video. Same as the link to our merch shop with lots of good products that may help you remind the world about Ukraine, and we need that. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channels. That's a blessing to have you in my life, and trust me, I value that a lot. And thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!